As you can see, we have found our dogs, and they are fairly sedate at this stage, which we're going to try that all again. A few little gremlins climbed on board and ended our little segment rather abruptly. But our dogs, as you can see, are sitting in the shade resting. They're breathing quite heavily, and that's because I'm pretty sure most of them had a really good meal this morning. As we were driving in, lots of them have quite nice big round tummies, which would tend to suggest that they've all had a fairly decent meal at some point this morning. And they are absolutely loving the fact that there are so many impala lambs around. I'm pretty sure that's what they're going after for the most part at the moment. They're just going from place to place and chasing these impala herds and panicking these lambs that don't have experience with wild dogs just yet, and are then grabbing them and feeding off those. So I'm pretty sure they had a good morning out. Seems that everyone at least has got a nice rounded tummy, which is good news. The thing is, though, is that it means that they're probably going to rest for quite some time. Starts to get a little bit lower, then we're going to start heading out and hopefully on a afternoon hunt, which will be fantastic. The problem is we're right up on the northern boundary, so hopefully they won't get up and go northwards. Hopefully they'll decide to run in a westerly direction, or maybe even south. That would be appreciated for sure. Now the pack that we've got here is the Investec Gimbali breakaway pack. It's the pack that's got the collared male in it, so the collared male from the Angama pack is within this particular grouping, and so I'm not sure how many of them are around at the moment. I haven't spent too much time with them this week, as I said, and so I'm interested to see how many members are part of it and whether or not there has been a split in them, because there has been a lot of contact calling from this grouping, and maybe they're trying to find everybody. Now, Christine, you were watching this morning and you were wondering whether or not this pack would help the member that, well, that individual that has the sore leg or broken leg. I didn't get to see the footage myself, so I'm not sure how bad that leg is, but theoretically, if that member could join the pack and keep up with the pack, they most certainly probably would accept it at this time of the year. At the end of the day, it's not a mating period, and therefore they are a lot more inclined to accept members within the group, and that dog would just have to be able to keep up, and it would be accepted within it. Whether or not they would help it is the next thing. I don't think they would go back and try and keep it up, slow right down to keep that one with it. You tend to find that those dogs trying to break off on their own, or they try and join up with a smaller group and then run around. The thing is, though, a dog with a broken leg like that is not necessarily a death sentence. So a lot of people would look at that and say, that dog is not going to be able to survive, it's got a broken leg. But in actual fact, wild dogs, it's quite common to see them with very bad leg injuries. The nature of the way that they hunt, the nature of the way that they run, it is quite common for them to have injuries, and you often see wild dog packs with a member that is limping or has got a sore leg or one of those kind of things. And in fact, there was a wild dog up in the northern parts of Kruger at one point that had only 2 legs. The other 2 legs, unfortunately, get lost in snaring. So snares are little wire traps that are put out for small animals, and sometimes the wild dogs get caught in it, and they will then unfortunately lose a limb of them's own. And that particular dog that was sort of debilitated by these snares and only had the 2 legs was still able to run and keep up with the pack and survive. So a broken leg, while it looks really bad for wild dogs, is part and parcel of their life. You often see dogs, and in fact, when I speak to Grant about the wild dogs and ask him about these things, he says to me, if there's not a wild dog limping in a pack, there is something wrong. They generally always have a dog within the ranks that seems to be having some sort of a limp. Like I say, the way that they run around and jump around and go crazy tends to mean that they sometimes unfortunately hurt themselves. And these animals are quite resilient. You'll find that maybe in time that leg resets and weight will start being put on it, and that dog will be able to then keep up a lot better and still stay with the pack. At the end of the day, that dog might actually even be here with them. We're not too far from where Scott saw that dog this morning. It's a little bit to our western side, and maybe through all the contact calling that we've been hearing over the last few days, maybe that dog is the one that's got separated and why they've been calling so much, and they'll come together and everything will be okay again. It depends on obviously a number of factors, but I would surmise that's why they're calling, is that a member or certain section of this pack has dissipated off or moved off, and there's so much contact calling to try and find one another at the end of the day. But it'll be interesting to count how many there are here, because I would love to know what the sort of dynamics are for the dogs. It seems as though there's been a lot of dogs all over the place. I know Noelle had 3 dogs this morning. Whether they're from this pack, I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if she had the Low Sabi breakaway pack or which one she had, but it'll be interesting to kind of see how it all goes. We're going to have to be a little bit patient though, because the end of the day, these dogs are going to be resting for some time. It is not a cloudy, overcast afternoon, which means they're not going to get running too early. At the end of the day, they also do have stuff in their stomach, and they have eaten, and so they will have a situation where they'll probably be fairly patient for now and just try and bide their time and rest off this hot part of the day before they then get up and start moving. Always good, though, to see the dogs. I love spending time with them. There's a thing about them is that you never know what's going to happen. So with dogs, they could be resting like this, and in 1 second they're up and they're going, and so it's always a great thing to have them around. They tend to cause utter chaos all over the place, and whether it's chasing impalas, causing chaos in elephant herds, or chasing leopards up trees, you never know with them. And they're around, and when they're around, generally action seems to follow them. So it's a worthwhile animal to be patient with and just to spend some time. Plus the fact that they're not an everyday experience. They're not an animal that we get to see regularly enough that to just kind of have a fleeting glimpse. Now, I believe a lot of you are saying that it's been such a treat to have the dogs around as much as we have over the past little bit. It is amazing, and it's almost in the last sort of 2 weeks, I would imagine, is how long they've been around for, and it seems to be this pack in particular that's just running the breadth and length of Djuma, and like I say, we're not complaining at all. It's been so wonderful to have them around and to see their tracks all over the place and have these amazing sightings. I know Noelle's been absolutely spoiled with the dogs this week. She's had 2 great sightings of them, and I know Steph's had a great sighting of them on foot as well, and so it's really good to have them around. And like I say, because they are as rare as they are, and we generally find in the winter months we see very little of them if they don't den anywhere nearby, that it's an absolute treat when they spend longer periods of time in this area and when they are around Djuma. Lily, who's 6 years old. Hello, Lily. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. You want to know who is the leader of this pack. Well, Lily, I, at the moment, am not sure who the leader is of this pack. And the reason why I say I'm not sure is because this pack has just gone under a huge change. So what's happened, Lily, is that a new male has come and the pack has split from the original pack. So there's some members have gone one way, some have gone another way, and so at the moment they're all just kind of trying to establish themselves within the pack. They're all trying to work out who is who, and you'll find that because it's not the time when they breed and have puppies, it means that they're all kind of just running around trying to feed one another at this stage. But as that is happening, Lily, so you're going to find that a male and a female are going to come to the fore, and they're going to be the individuals that start leading the pack and become the alpha pair. I would surmise, or I think, Lily, that the male with the collar is a fairly dominant individual within it. He's a much older dog than a lot of the others that we have in here, and so I would imagine that he might be the alpha male. As for the alpha female, I'm not 100% sure just yet. There is a female in this group. Well, there was. I haven't seen her yet today. She has very white feet, so we used to call her Socks, and she might be in here, and she seems to be quite a dominant female, because when I've watched this pack in the past, I've seen that the males tend to hound her quite a lot and tend to be around her, and she tends to get up with the collared male, and when those two get up, the rest of the pack seems to respond. But at this stage, it doesn't seem as though there is a clear alpha male and female just yet. Now, Lily, what's really interesting with these dogs, and hopefully we'll see it later, so I hope that you stay watching, is that when there's not an alpha male or female yet in the pack, and when they're not quite established as in terms of who is dominant, you'll find that the dogs are all going to stand up and they're going to start sneezing, and the sneezing is like a voting process. So it's like a little conversation as to where they're going to go and what they're going to do. So hopefully later they'll do that, and it's amazing to watch, and maybe then we can work out who is the more dominant than the others. But while we try and sit patiently with our dogs and see if they do wake up, let's go back across to Jamie in the Masai Mara with those beautiful lions and see if they're having just as much of a nap after their meal. Well, as you can see, our dogs are still very sleepy. We've repositioned. You can see now what I was talking about those full tummies and that heavy breathing. That is a very, very round tummy that we've got there. And these dogs are just going to take it easy, I think, for now. It's still too warm. The one thing, though, is that you can see with dogs is that even though they go on a hunting session in the mornings or evenings, is that not every single one of the dogs will get an equal amount of food. If you look at the third dog at the back, very round tummy. Look at the dog in the front in comparison. Its tummy is much smaller, and so there will be dogs within this grouping that are still hungry, and that is why they will hunt again this evening. Even though one dog might be full, there are others that are going to be looking for food, and so we'll have a situation where these guys are probably going to head out and hunt. The interesting thing, though, is that it seems to be all the older males are lying together by themselves on this right-hand side. So this is a group of 4 males. These are all adult males, if you want to call it that. Remember that most of the wild dogs within our system, very seldom are wild dogs going to make it past 7 years old. So most of the older males, when we refer to older male dogs, we're talking about dogs that are over 3 years old, and all 3 or 4 of these guys are probably over that age. If you look at them, they all got quite thick collars of fur around their heads. You can obviously see the dog in the middle with the collar on it itself. And funny enough, I was just talking to VM about this. I actually was part of the team that put that collar on that dog, so I know that dog very well. I've handled and taken blood from that dog, and it was part of the distemper program. We did it quite far from here. That's why it's amazing that this dog has actually come into this area. Is that dog comes from quite far north of us, north of Open Gate in Angama, which is, it's a long way away, and the movement for him to get here was really interesting. I was shown the satellite GPS tracking collar data the other day, and he ran from Ngala. He ended up going towards the Mozambican boundary, and then from the Mozambican boundary he then started to shift back towards Manyeleti. From Manyeleti he started to come back southwards, and then he eventually bumped into this pack, and that was when we saw him for the very first time that day. On Djuma was the first day that he had been recorded with this pack. So since then is how long he has been a part of this pack. That particular collar, if you're wondering how long it's been on, we collared that dog, I was just checking now, on the 12th of April. So that's how long that collar has been on that dog. Now it will be on probably for about 2 years, and the reason why is because it's part of the distemper rabies program. They are inoculating these dogs as much as they can for canine distemper, and so it takes a few updates of that inoculation, and so the tracking collar helps for him to be found, and the pack that he's within, or that pack that he's in, to be found. The problem is now is that he's not in the same pack that we originally collared him in. He's now in a different pack. Luckily though, that pack still does have a member that is collared. We collared 2 dogs that day, and so the other one with the collar is still part of that pack, and so they will be able to monitor both that pack and now even this pack as well, which is really great news. So interesting kind of how it all works. The funny thing is as I look at that collar now, it's amazing the wear and tear that has taken place on that particular collar in the last few months. When you first put these collars on, they are beautifully kind of made. They've got this wild dog pattern spray painted on them so that it tries to blend in a little bit better. But of course, being wild dogs and the life that they lead, all of the paint gets pulled off immediately, and it then goes back to its normal sort of state. You can see even the leather has kind of had wear and tear, and it's amazing actually how much they use it. So it's an interesting kind of process, and it's strange to think that I've actually kind of been up close to that dog in some ways. It really is quite an odd thing. And I think I've got a photo somewhere here of this particular dog when it was down and when it was being collared somewhere. In fact, actually I've got a very cool photo of our wild dog when he woke up. So it was an interesting situation when he woke up. What happened was he decided as he woke up to jump in the air, and he's almost become a kangaroo dog. So that's him way back in the day, jumping up and running off back to join his pack. Right, now while we sit with our endangered wild dogs, I believe Brent Leo Smith is probably with an animal that I really wish we would see more often here on Djuma, that is just as endangered as these guys.
Well, we've decided we've got about, I don't know, 8-9 minutes before the rain hits us. So while it's clear and beautiful, we decided to spend more time with
at finding places to find food. You can see the dogs are completely unperturbed by all of this. They don't care too much for all of the birds that are flying around, and then really too worried about the fact that there was a massive eruption of food items in the form of little winged insects. You can see they're far more kind of relaxed about what's going on in life. But it might mean that they will hatch again at some point. The interesting part about it is, and what fascinates me when you watch these kind of hatches of birds, is that you'll have a system where you'll find birds like Wahlbergs and lesser spotted eagles will often hunt other birds, but yet in a situation like this, because there's such an amount of food, all of these birds will just feed together and not actually worry about those bigger eagles, even though they probably would have tried to dive bomb them in a normal situation. But our dogs, Tucker, you wondering if... Sorry, I've actually forgotten your question now, Tucker. I do apologize. Tucker is 5 years old, and I've completely forgotten what he's had to say. So, Megs, if you can repeat that for me. Sorry, I was so busy on the bird tangent and so excitable about all the bids that I saw that I forgot what the question was, which does happen. I'm getting old at the end of the day, and so these things do happen. Tucker, so you're wondering if the collar hurts the dog. I thought that's what you asked, but I just wanted to double check. Now, Tucker, with these collars, it shouldn't hurt the dog in any way. If it's hurting the dog, then it's been put on wrong. So when they put the collar on, you'll put the collar around, and then you try and put 2 fingers between the collar and the dog's fur. And that means that the collar is at least on securely enough that the dog won't pull it off and just grab it on branches and those kind of things, but it's also got enough space that if it's eating or if it's moving, that it's not being restricted by that collar. So no, it doesn't hurt the dog, and it shouldn't hurt the dog. If the collar is too tight, then you'll see that the fur will push up against that collar, and the collar will almost be around, and you'll find the dog will walk around and it will almost make these kind of coughing, choking sounds, which means that it is on then too tight. But this particular collar itself is quite loose. I know, because like I say, I was there when it was put on, Tucker, and you can actually move that collar from his front legs all the way to his ears. It moves quite a bit on that particular area, and so it's not very, it doesn't look as tight as what, well, it's not as tight as what it looks, and so it actually doesn't hurt him in any way whatsoever. It's interesting how dogs react to them, because the first moment he kind of trotted around and he was scratching at it a little bit, and then after a day or two they're actually quite fine with it. They don't worry about it too much at all, and then they'll run around no problem, and you'll see he doesn't actually even pay any attention to it whatsoever. I'm pretty sure obviously he'd prefer it not being on, and but when you've got a situation where an animal is so endangered, you need to be able to monitor them, and particularly with this canine distemper, because at the end of the day, distemper is such a bad virus for these dogs that we need to be able to get rid of it, and need to be able to see if we can vaccinate for it. Right, now our birds have all dissipated, but Jamie Patterson has found a bird of her own, and it's another bird that I'm quite jealous that we don't see more of down here in South Africa. Well, the dogs are still, like I say, fast asleep. They are not yet waking up. It's still warm out here. We're sitting in a bit of sunny area, and the sun still has a bit of a bite to it. So I would imagine we're going to need that sun just to go down a little bit before they start to wake up. I didn't expect them to get going first thing in the afternoon, but you never know with dogs. So it's always better to rather be with them than not with them, and rather just be patient and spend some time watching them kind of pant away their full bellies, then being away, and then they get up and go and you lose them. So that's why we've come a little bit earlier, but it's all nice just to actually sit with the dogs. It's a beautiful evening on Djuma. Since we've had that rainy day that we had a few days ago, yesterday and today have just been the most wonderful days. The sun has been out. It's not been excessively hot, but there is a lot of green lushness going on. There's a few insects that are out, birds are chirping, and so it is a beautiful time of the day to be out and about on the reserve. And sitting with wild dogs and just kind of taking in the scenery and watching what goes on around you is never the worst way to spend an afternoon. Preston, you're wondering if the dogs cry tears. Now, Preston is 8 years old, and I'm not 100% sure, to be honest, Preston. I don't think so. I've never seen a dog cry tears, and when it has been sad, I've never seen one kind of anyway having tears coming out at all, whether it be sad or happy or anything like that. What they will do sometimes is they do sometimes get a little bit of liquid that comes off of their eye, but that's normally if there's a lot of dust in their eyes. Like us, when we get a lot of dust and dirt, then our eyes start to what we call water, and that just helps to clean the eye and make sure that the eye doesn't have too much in it. But I haven't actually seen them physically crying myself, and so I don't think that they do. I don't think they cry like people would or like humans do, Preston. I think it's more a situation that it's just there to help keep the eye clean and keep those eyes from having dirt and dust and anything else that might collect inside. It's interesting though, it's an interesting question, because maybe some of you can help us. Maybe some of you have more information as to whether wild dogs are capable of crying. I've never read anything about them crying, but it's possible at the end of the day. There's some weird and wonderful facts in the animal kingdom, and sometimes things like this can happen, but I doubt that it is the case. I don't think we can say that they cry like us as people. I think it's more a case that it's done just out of a natural reaction to keep that eye as clean as possible. Carol, you're wondering about the differences between wild dogs and jackals, given that Brent had a jackal earlier. Well, Carol, they are actually in two different groupings. They're not part of the same family. Jackals are much smaller than wild dog, so you'll find that they'll probably stand, I would say up to about just underneath the shoulder height of a wild dog. They're also a lot shorter if we look at the length of this animal. Wild dogs also have much bigger ears than what the jackals have, and the way that they go about their business is very different. Jackals tend to form a pair, a monogamous pair that they'll pair together for life, and they'll move around and have their young ones, and then the young ones distribute away from them. Whereas wild dogs, as we can see here, are a pack animal where they'll have multiple different individuals that join together with an alpha pair within the pack, and they look after each other like that. So it's a bit different from the jackals in that regard. Also, habitat tends to play a bit of a role in things. We tend to find that our jackals tend to be, oh, is that an elephant making its way in? Well spotted, VM. So there we go. I was saying earlier maybe the Ellies will join us at the wild dogs, and there we have an Ellie right there. That actually might cause the dogs to wake up, which is really cool to see, and it's a young individual, so there might be more on their way out of this little thicket, and hopefully they're going towards Tambuti Dam, which is just behind us, and that will cause the dogs to stir a little bit just now. But back to the jackals. The jackals tend to be more open area animals, whereas the dogs we tend to find run all over the place. And so there's basic differences between the two of them. Like I say, a much smaller animal more than anything else is the easiest way to spot the difference, and the dogs have a intricate coat pattern, whereas jackals, even though individuals have slight differences within the coats, most of them are fairly uniform in the way that they look. So there'll be a side stripe jackal with that white stripe, or the black back, which has got the black saddle on its back, whereas dogs, it's all over the place. Right, well, let's wait and see how these Ellies move and whether the elephants are going to move up towards the wild dogs. And while we do that, I believe Jamie is still on her birding mission, and it seems as though she's got some more things to tell you about our feathered friends. Well, Jamie, I hope that you have a wonderful evening further. I think Jamie's on probably starting to head back to home. Our dogs, unfortunately, though, are still fast asleep. I was hoping that they would get up. Our elephant caught a whiff of them and then hightailed it out of here. It did not even come and cause any trouble. It just went the opposite way and went running off. And so there's no chance of the Ellies at this stage waking them up. But you never know. Maybe in the last few minutes and they will kind of pop out. Now, unfortunately, we've had some gremlins here at Djuma, which means that we are not going to be continuing on as we normally do later in the afternoon. We are unfortunately going to have to end the show in the next few minutes because our TriCaster, or our technical problem, has kind of taken over, which is a bit of a shame, but at least we've been out and about for a short period of time. We've had a fairly successful afternoon, VM and I've actually loved it. We've had birds, we've had elephants, we've had wild dogs, and well, that for me is not the worst way to spend any time whatsoever. I'm hoping, though, that the dogs will stick around over the next few days. It would be lovely just to keep them over the weekend and down into the next week. Seems as though these dogs absolutely love TV time, because whenever we have TV shows around the corner, the dogs seem to come out of nowhere. I know Brent has had some incredible days with the wild dogs on TV, and so maybe they'll just stick around for the next week, which would be absolutely wonderful for all of us at the end of the day. It's great when we get to see these guys, and like I say, they're just such action-packed animals, and they're always up to something, and that's why we all love to spend so much time with them out here as well. So it's a situation where we've got, you know, them around, and I believe another pack has just been located somewhere on the eastern side of Djuma, so 3 dogs there, and then injured dog has also just been around. So it's going to be interesting to see how the dynamics play out over the next couple of days. I would imagine that there's going to be lots of calling, lots of moving about, and hopefully we'll be able to show all of you as we go along. Now, unfortunately, it is that time of the day for us to say goodbye from a very restful pack of dogs and a rather nervous, scared elephant that ran off in the background. It's been an absolute pleasure having you guys out this afternoon. I'm sure Jamie, Brent have been loving having you guys with them, and from myself and Scott, we'll see you all tomorrow morning on our